All right, so are you ready to dive deep into the four agreements?
I am, yeah.
This is going to be fun. Okay, so you sent over that YouTube video
Uh-huh.
summary of the four agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And I got to say, it got me thinking, like, how much do these agreements really hold up
Right.
in our crazy modern world? I mean,
Yeah.
are they just kind of like,
Yeah.
feel-good platitudes, or can they genuinely transform your life?
That's the question, right? That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
I think what really struck me about Ruiz's approach is that he's
Mhm.
he's pulling from this like ancient Toltec wisdom, but he
Yeah.
makes it incredibly relevant
Yeah.
to like everyday struggles, you know?
Yeah.
It's not like promising some,
Right.
mystical enlightenment or anything.
Right.
He's talking about really practical tools for navigating the messiness of human relationships and finding genuine peace.
Yeah, I think that's what's so appealing about it.
Right?
Okay, so let's jump into the first agreement.
Mm.
Be impeccable with your word. I mean, it sounds simple enough, right? Don't lie, be kind, but Ruiz goes so much deeper than that.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's saying words are like magic.
He actually uses the word magic.
Right.
Yeah, and it's not as woo-woo as it sounds, I think.
Yeah.
When you think about it,
Yeah.
we use words to build entire worlds in our minds. We use words to influence
Yeah.
others. We use words to literally
Yeah.
create our realities. And so
Yeah.
Ruiz's point is that this power is often
Right.
wielded unconsciously. Like
Yeah.
we throw words around without really fully
Right.
grasping their impact both on ourselves and those around us.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
That makes sense. He does bring up some pretty extreme examples, like
Wait. Yeah.
how Hitler's rhetoric, fueled a horrific genocide.
Right.
But how does that translate to, everyday life? Like my
Yeah.
word choice when ordering coffee isn't exactly going to,
Right.
start a war or something.
Well, but the principle is the same. I mean, it's about
Okay.
recognizing the subtle ways that our language shapes our experience.
Okay.
So, for example, if you constantly use phrases like,
Mhm.
I'm so stressed, or this is going to be a disaster,
Right.
you're essentially programming your mind for negativity.
Yeah.
You're not just describing reality, you're creating it.
Okay. So it's like each word is like a little spell and we're constantly casting it whether we realize it or not.
And remember, he says this applies to our inner dialogue as well. Like
Yeah.
that constant stream of self-criticism.
Uh-huh.
I'm not good enough. I'm such a failure.
Right.
Those are spells too. And those can be incredibly damaging.
Yeah, that really hits home for me. I'm definitely guilty of that negative self-talk,
Right. Yeah.
Like it's my default setting sometimes.
Right,
So,
right.
okay, if we're bombarded with so much negativity,
Yeah.
both externally and internally, like how do we break free from that cycle?
Right.
How do we become more impeccable with our word?
Well, it's a process.
Yeah.
And it starts with awareness.
Oh, okay.
Pay attention to the words you use, not just, the big dramatic pronouncements, but
Right.
the everyday chatter,
Yeah.
How do they make you feel?
Uh-huh.
How do they impact the people around you?
Right.
And once you start noticing those patterns,
Yeah.
then you can begin to kind of consciously shift them.
Okay. So it's about choosing words that uplift and empower both ourselves and others.
Precisely. It's about
Yeah.
using the power of language to create
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
more positive and harmonious reality.
Right.
It's not about denying the negative.
Uh-huh.
It's about choosing a different lens through which to view the world.
Okay. Okay. That leads us to the second agreement. Don't take anything personally.
Yeah.
I struggle with this one.
Right.
I'm pretty sensitive, and it's hard not to feel hurt when someone criticizes me or says something unkind,
Yeah, I think we all struggle with that to some extent.
Yeah.
We're wired for connection.
Uh-huh.
And when that connection feels threatened,
Right.
it's natural to feel hurt.
Yeah.
But Ruiz's point is that
Yeah.
taking things personally is a trap.
Okay.
It keeps us stuck
Yeah.
in this cycle of reactivity and suffering.
But how can you not take it personally when someone is like directly attacking you?
Right.
I mean, it feels like
Yeah.
you're just suppressing your emotions or pretending not to care.
Right. Well, it's not about
Yeah.
denying your emotions. It's about understanding where they're coming from.
Okay.
When someone lashes out at you, it's usually a reflection of their own pain, their own insecurities, their own internal struggles.
So you're saying it's more about them than it is about me.
Exactly. Think of it this way.
Okay.
Everyone is walking around with their own internal movie playing in their heads.
Yeah.
This movie is shaped by their past experiences, their beliefs, their fears, their desires.
Right.
And when they interact with you, they're essentially
Right.
projecting that movie onto you. They're
Wow.
seeing you
Got
through
it.
the lens of their own narrative.
Wow, that's a powerful image.
Right.
So if someone is being negative towards me, it's not necessarily about who I am.
Right.
It's about
It's about the movie that they're
the movie they're playing in their head.
playing in their head. Exactly.
Okay.
And once you understand that, it becomes much easier to detach from their negativity.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you have to condone their behavior,
Right.
but you can choose not to let it define you.
Yeah.
You can choose not to take it personally.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's like recognizing that their words are just a reflection of their own inner world, not
Mhm.
necessarily a reflection of mine.
Precisely. And when you can see that,
Yeah.
it frees you from the need to defend yourself or prove them wrong. You can simply observe their behavior with compassion and understanding, knowing that it's more about them than it is about you.
That's huge.
Right.
This is a great segue into the third agreement then. Don't make assumptions.
You're right.
I mean, if everyone's living in their own little movie, how can we ever truly know what's going on with them? Don't we have to make some assumptions just to like function in the world?
Of course, we make assumptions all the time. You know, it's how our brains make sense of the world.
Right.
But Ruiz is talking about a specific kind of assumption,
Okay.
the kind that is based on like fear, insecurity,
Right.
or a lack of information.
Okay, can you give an example of what that looks like in real life?
Sure. Imagine you're texting a friend
Mhm.
and they don't respond right away.
Yeah?
You might start assuming the worst. They're mad at me. They're ignoring me. They don't care about me.
Right.
These assumptions are often fueled by
Yeah.
our own insecurities and past experiences.
Oh, I've totally been there.
Hmm.
One unanswered text and my mind spirals into this black hole.
Or negativity, yeah.
And what happens when we make those negative assumptions?
Yeah.
We create unnecessary drama, conflict, and suffering.
Yeah.
We start acting out based on those assumptions, which can damage relationships.
Right.
And create even more negativity.
So what's the antidote?
Right.
Like, how do we avoid falling into that trap of assumption making?
It comes back to communication. Instead of
Definitely.
assuming you know what someone is thinking or feeling, ask them.
Right.
It sounds simple, but it's amazing how often we avoid asking those
Yeah.
clarifying questions.
Right.
We're afraid of the answer,
Uh-huh.
or we think we already know, but the truth is we can never truly know
Right.
what's going on in someone else's mind unless we ask.
That's so true. It's like we would rather cling to our assumptions, even if they're
Mhm.
negative, than risk the vulnerability of asking for clarification. And that vulnerability is key. You know, it's about being willing to admit that we
Yeah.
don't have all the answers,
Hmm.
that we're open to hearing a different perspective.
Mhm.
And when we approach conversations with that kind of humility, it opens up a whole new
Gosh.
level of understanding and connection.
Yeah, that's so good. This is all making me realize how interconnected these agreements are.
Right.
You can't really practice one without the others.
Exactly. They work together. They create a framework for
Mhm.
living with more awareness, integrity, and compassion.
Hmm.
And this leads us to the fourth agreement, which
Hmm.
is perhaps the most challenging of all. Always do your best.
Why is that the most challenging? It seems
Well, because, you know,
pretty straightforward. Just put in the effort.
yeah, but it's not about striving for perfection
Okay.
or pushing ourselves to the point of burnout.
Right.
It's about recognizing that our best is going to fluctuate from day to day.
Yeah.
And that's okay. You know, some days our best will be extraordinary.
Right.
Other days our best will be simply getting
Yeah.
out of bed and putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah. I can relate to that. Some
Yeah.
days I'm firing on all cylinders, and other days I'm just trying to survive.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of this agreement.
Okay.
You know, it's not about
Yeah.
judgment, it's about acceptance.
Yeah.
It's about meeting ourselves where we are in each moment and doing the best that we can with what we've got.
So it's not about the outcome, it's about the intention.
Precisely.
Okay.
It's about showing up with a willingness to give our best effort,
Uh-huh.
regardless of the circumstances. And here's the key.
Yeah.
When we detach from expectations
Yeah.
and focus on the process itself,
Uh-huh.
we free ourselves from a lot of unnecessary pressure and self-judgment.
That makes sense. It's like shifting the focus from what am I going to get out of this
Yeah.
to how can I show up fully
Right.
in this moment.
Yeah. Exactly. And when we approach life with that kind of intentionality,
Uh-huh.
we create a ripple effect of positivity.
Okay.
Not only do we benefit from the experience,
Yeah.
but we also inspire others to do the same.
I love that idea. So if we can like shift our internal state to one of intentionality and effort, it
Yeah.
will naturally
Yeah.
manifest in our external
Yes.
actions and interactions.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that
Yeah.
our inner world shapes our outer world. And that's a powerful realization because it means we have the power to create a more positive and fulfilling reality
Yeah,
for ourselves and for those around us.
that is powerful.
Right.
Yeah, that is powerful.
Mhm.
It's funny as you're talking about, always doing your best. I was thinking about how often we're actually doing the opposite.
Uh-huh.
Not intentionally, of course, but
Right.
because we're so caught up in what Ruiz calls domestication.
Right. Yeah, it's such a brilliant yet unsettling way
Yeah.
to frame it.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like we've been trained
Yeah.
to live by somebody else's rules,
Uh-huh.
somebody else's definition of success, somebody else's version of best.
Right. We're told to, follow the rules, fit in, get good grades, land the high-paying job.
Right.
Even if those things don't truly light us up, it's almost as though we're being rewarded
Right.
for betraying our true selves.
And that's where the suffering comes in,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because living by those external rules often means
Yeah.
silencing our inner voice,
Yeah.
our intuition, our unique gifts.
Right.
It's like we're living somebody else's dream
Yeah.
instead of our own.
Okay, so how does this idea of domestication connect to the four agreements?
Right.
It seems like it makes it even harder to practice them.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
absolutely does. Think about it. How can you be impeccable with your word
Yeah.
when you're constantly censoring yourself to please others?
Right.
How can you not take things personally
Yeah.
when your entire sense of self-worth is based on
Yeah.
external validation?
It's like domestication sets us up for failure. We're conditioned to break the agreements before we even know they exist.
Exactly. And that's why Ruiz emphasizes the importance of like unlearning those limiting beliefs and behaviors.
Yeah.
Right. It's about recognizing the ways in which we've been conditioned to live
Yeah.
inauthentically
Yeah.
and then consciously choosing to break free
Right.
from that conditioning.
So unlearning is like the prerequisite for actually living by the agreements.
I think so.
You know?
I think it's about reclaiming your power, your voice, your unique
Yeah.
way of being in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that process can be uncomfortable,
Yeah.
even painful at times, because it requires
Right.
facing those deep-seated fears and insecurities that have kept us
Yeah.
domesticated.
I imagine it takes a lot of courage to challenge those like ingrained.
It does, yeah.
beliefs and behaviors.
Yeah. It's like going against the current of society almost.
It does, but the rewards are immense. I
Right.
mean, when you break free from domestication, you open yourself up
Okay.
to a whole new level of freedom, joy, and authenticity.
So let's connect this back to each agreement. How does domestication show up
Okay.
in our attempts to be impeccable with our word?
Okay, well, think about all the times you've bitten your tongue, held back your truth, or said what you thought people wanted to hear instead of what you truly felt. That's domestication at work.
Right.
It's the fear of judgment. It's the need for approval. It's the belief that our true selves aren't acceptable.
Ouch. Yeah. I feel that. It's like we're so afraid of being rejected or ridiculed
Right.
that we end up betraying ourselves
Right.
just to fit in.
And that betrayal creates a disconnect
Yeah.
within us. It erodes our self-trust, our sense of integrity. So
Right.
becoming impeccable with our word
Yeah.
requires dismantling those fears and recognizing that our voice matters,
Right.
even if it's not always popular.
Right. That makes me think about all the times I've stayed silent
Yeah.
when I should have spoken up.
Right.
All the times I've let people kind of walk all over me because I'm afraid of rocking the boat or something.
Yeah.
Is that domestication too?
Absolutely. It's that deeply ingrained belief that we're not
Yeah.
good enough, strong enough, worthy enough to assert our boundaries or
Right.
stand up for ourselves.
Okay.
And that belief makes us vulnerable to taking things personally,
Right.
which is the second agreement.
Right. Because if we don't believe in our own worth,
Right.
then we're constantly seeking validation
Exactly.
from others. And when
Yeah.
we don't get it, we crumble.
Exactly. We become overly sensitive to criticism.
Yeah.
We internalize other people's negativity, and we allow their opinions to define our
Right.
sense of self.
It's like we're giving away our power to those who are
Right.
most likely still domesticated themselves.
That's such a great point.
Right.
The people who are most likely to try to
Yes.
control us or manipulate us are often the ones who are
Right.
most deeply trapped in their own domestication.
Okay, so how do we break free from this pattern?
Right.
How do we stop taking things so personally
Right.
when we're, surrounded by people who are
I
still
know.
playing by these old domesticated rules?
It comes back to self-awareness and self-love.
Okay.
The more we understand our own worth,
Yeah.
the less we need external validation.
Right.
It's about recognizing that our
Yeah.
value comes from within, not from the opinions of others.
So it's about like building that inner strength,
Yeah.
that unshakable sense of self,
Exactly.
so that we're not constantly swayed by the winds
Right.
of other people's judgments.
Exactly. And that takes practice.
Yeah.
It's about consciously choosing to focus on our own growth, our own healing, our own journey, rather than getting caught up in the drama of other people's lives.
Yeah. That makes me think about the third agreement. Don't make assumptions.
Right.
How does domestication fuel those assumptions?
Well, domestication teaches us to see the world
Yeah.
through a very narrow lens. We're taught to judge, to categorize, to
Right.
make assumptions
Yeah.
based on limited information.
Right.
We're conditioned to believe
Uh-huh.
that there's a right way and a wrong way
Yeah.
to do things, a right way and a wrong way to
Right.
be.
And that rigidity makes it hard to see things from
Oh.
other perspectives, right?
Exactly.
Like we get stuck in our own
Yeah.
limited view of reality
Right.
and assume everyone else sees things the same way.
Exactly. And that leads to,
Misunderstandings, conflicts, and missed opportunities for
Well,
connection.
right.
It's like we're all speaking different languages because we're operating from such different belief systems.
Yeah. So breaking free from the tendency to
Right.
make assumptions requires opening up
Exactly.
to different perspectives, being willing to challenge our own beliefs,
Right.
and recognizing that there's no one right way to see the world.
It's about embracing curiosity, asking questions,
Yeah.
and being open to the possibility
Yeah.
that we might be wrong.
Right. And that brings us back to the fourth agreement. Always do your best.
Right.
I'm curious, how does domestication affect our ability to truly do our best?
Well, domestication often sets us up for this
Okay.
cycle of striving and never feeling good enough.
Yeah.
We're constantly chasing external validation, trying to meet somebody else's standards.
Yeah. Which can lead to burnout, resentment,
Right.
and a sense of emptiness.
It's like we're running on a hamster wheel,
Exactly.
going through the motions, but never
Yeah.
truly feeling fulfilled.
Exactly. And that's where Ruiz emphasizes the importance of
Yeah.
aligning our actions with our values. It's
Yeah.
about asking ourselves, what truly matters to me?
Uh-huh.
What brings me joy? What kind of impact
Okay.
do I want to make in the world?
So it's about shifting the focus from external expectations to internal alignment.
Exactly. It's about doing things because they feel right, because they
Yeah.
resonate with our soul, not because
Yeah.
we're trying to please somebody else or achieve some
Right.
arbitrary goal.
Right. It's like the difference between being driven by fear and being driven by love.
Exactly.
When we're driven by fear,
Yeah.
we're constantly trying to prove ourselves
Right.
to avoid failure,
Right.
to meet someone else's expectations.
Right.
But when we're driven by love,
Yeah.
we're free to be ourselves.
Yes.
To express our unique gifts and to make a
Yeah.
meaningful contribution to the world.
That's beautifully said.
Yeah.
And that's the essence of what
Mhm.
Ruiz is trying to convey in the four agreements. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
It's about breaking free from the chains of domestication
Yeah.
and stepping into our full potential
Wow.
as conscious, empowered, and loving beings.
Love that. So good.
Yeah.
As we're talking about this, I'm realizing that domestication is almost like living in a dream,
Uh-huh.
one that someone else created for us.
It is a powerful metaphor,
Yeah.
isn't it? Ruiz actually talks about this concept of living in a dream
Right.
throughout the book.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's the idea that we're all perceiving reality
Yeah.
through this, like
Ah,
filter of
wow.
beliefs, conditioning, and past experiences.
So it's like we're all walking around in our own little bubbles,
Right.
mistaking our limited perceptions for like objective truth.
And that's why communication
Yeah.
can be so challenging.
Yeah.
We're essentially trying to like bridge the gap
Oh,
between our individual dreams,
Yeah.
which can be vastly different.
Okay, so if we're all trapped in these like dreamlike realities,
Right.
how do we break free? How do we like wake up and see things more clearly?
Well, the four agreements are essentially a roadmap
Okay.
for waking up from the dream of domestication.
Okay.
They provide tools for like questioning our assumptions,
Right.
challenging our beliefs,
Yeah.
and creating a more conscious and fulfilling reality.
I see what you mean. If we can become more impeccable with our word,
Right.
we're less likely to buy into those limiting narratives
Exactly.
that keep us trapped in the dream.
And by not taking things personally,
Yeah.
we can detach from those emotional dramas.
That kind of cloud our
Mhm.
perceptions.
Right.
We can start to see people's behavior as a reflection of their own internal struggles rather than a personal attack.
And if we can stop making assumptions,
Right.
we can open ourselves up to new possibilities, new perspectives, new ways of being.
Instead of clinging to our preconceived notions,
Right.
we can approach each interaction
Yeah.
with curiosity, openness, and a willingness to learn.
It sounds like a lot of work.
It is work, yeah.
Is it even possible to fully wake up from the dream?
Well, I don't know if it's about fully waking up, but rather about becoming more conscious of the dream.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that our perceptions are just that, perceptions,
Yeah.
not absolute truths.
Right.
And that realization gives us a certain amount of freedom.
Freedom to like choose how we want to experience reality.
Exactly. We can
Thank you.
choose to believe in a
Yeah.
dream that empowers us.
Uplifts us and inspires us to live our
Yeah.
best lives.
I love that. It's like we're the directors of our own movies and we have the power to write a script. That's a great analogy that reflects our highest aspirations.
And the four agreements
Yeah.
are the tools we need to create
Right.
a masterpiece.
Okay, so if we can like wake up from the dream of domestication and start living by the four agreements, what does that look like
Yeah.
in real life? Like what kind of freedom are we talking about?
I think it's a freedom from like needless suffering, a
Uh.
freedom from self-sabotage,
Right.
a freedom from the constant need
Yeah.
for approval, It's a freedom to be ourselves, to express our truth, to live in alignment with our
Okay.
values.
That sounds pretty amazing.
It is pretty amazing.
But let's be real. It can be scary to step outside
It can, yeah.
of that like familiar dream,
Yeah.
even if it's not serving us.
It definitely takes courage to challenge the status quo,
Yeah.
to question the beliefs that we've held for so long,
Right.
to risk
Right.
being different.
So how do we overcome that fear?
Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone who's like feeling stuck in their own dream, yearning for more freedom, but afraid to take the leap?
I would say start small.
Okay.
Choose one agreement that resonates with you
Yeah.
and focus on practicing it
Okay.
in your daily life.
Right.
Notice when you're falling back into old patterns
Yeah.
and gently guide yourself back to the agreement. It's a process and it takes time.
And I imagine self-compassion is key. Like
It is, yeah.
we're not going to get it right all the time.
Right?
And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly. And remember, the journey itself is the reward.
Okay.
As we practice these agreements, you're not just changing our behavior.
Right.
We're transforming our entire way of being.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
So it's not about achieving some like end goal of enlightenment or perfection.
Right.
It's about embracing the journey of self-discovery and growth
Exactly.
that comes with living by these agreements.
It's about showing up every day with a willingness to
Yeah.
learn, to grow,
Uh-huh.
and to become the best versions
Right.
of ourselves.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive
It has.
into the four agreements.
Yeah.
We've explored how these seemingly simple principles
Yeah.
can actually lead to profound
Yes.
personal transformation.
It's been a pleasure discussing this with you.
Likewise.
Yeah.
And to you listening, we encourage you to to keep exploring these agreements and to see how they can help you
Uh-huh.
create a more fulfilling
Right,
and
right.
meaningful life.
Yeah.
Remember, the power to transform your reality lies within you. Thanks for joining us.